Hello, my name is John Harris, and I am at Moonlight Industries, a leading limousine manufacturer. And today we are here to do a rendition of Realistic Fire on an H2 Hummer. I'm going to be mixing PVC 44 Snow White Pearl from House of Color. You could use any base, Snow White Pearl, Silver White Pearl. I prefer Snow White Pearl because of the reflective quality once the candies are laid on. Mixture is 2 to 1, 2 parts paint, 1 part reducer. Reducer depending on shop conditions. I prefer to play with the viscosity a little bit for the type of application I'm going to be doing. I'm using an RU310, House of Color. Pretty cool in here now because of the temperature. I'm using a faster reducer. Like I said, it should be 2 to 1, but I'm thinning it down a little more than 2 to 1 because I'm going to be shooting pearl through an airbrush, which some people don't like doing. Pearls get clogged up a little bit in the airbrush. The larger the nozzle, the more even the spray pattern on the vehicle surface. But for what we're doing, the evenness doesn't play a part right now. And this is the viscosity should, for me, about a half a second in between each drop. I think we're ready to go now. I'm going to load it into the gun right now. This is a DeVilbiss HVLP touch-up gun, and the spray pattern, I narrow it all the way down as far as it can go because I'm going to be doing a rough sketch of basically what I want the flow of the flame to be like. I'm going to test the air pressure. Normally I play with the air pressure up and down as I'm going, and the spray pattern. Okay. And just doing a rough sketch, all the curves and the throats of the flame of where I want it to be, just roughly. I'm not concerned about detail right now. Keep in mind this is Snow White Pearl, so yes, there's going to be a lot of overspray getting on the other parts of the vehicle, which is not a problem right now. Most of the front of the vehicle is going to be totally covered with pearl. There's a heavier concentration. I play with the air pressure and the fan pattern at this stage, and distance from the nozzle to the vehicle. Down to low pressure and back up to high pressure. Some parts of the fire are going to be heavier than the others. I recommend passing over the heavier parts numerous times because you don't want to load on pearl because it will flow down and then you'll have a mess. You have to wipe everything off and start back over again. I'm laying down heavier coats. From one vehicle to the next, I never plan it out. This particular vehicle, from the beginning to the fender, to the door, further on, right now I have no idea of what pattern I'm going to go with. I just go with the flow, just like fire is. It moves with the wind. So you have to keep that in mind. You don't plan it out, don't second guess, just keep it going. I'm laying down heavier coats, starting to define more of where I want the throats of the flames to be. Being that the front end of the vehicle is going to have a lot of pearl, at this stage you do want to lay your pearl down evenly. You just don't want to go sporadically, and that is an important point. You want to have your pearl lay down evenly. You don't want to puddle it up because once I candy it, all of that is going to show. That's why I play with the air pressure from high to low. Don't want to puddle anything up. Keep it even. There's going to be heavier spots, but it should be even though. You should lay it down even. If it's going to be heavy, it should be heavy even. If it's going to be light, it should be light even. Check my spray pattern again. You don't want that to happen. That's puddling. You hold it in one place too long, it'll puddle. You don't want that to happen. I'm starting to define a little bit more with the touch-up gun. I don't want to go beyond how heavy I'm getting here now, because I'm at the point now where if I keep going heavier, it'll just build up and build up. And I don't want that. I don't want it to puddle up. Okay, I'm coming in with a Tack Cloth, which is an absorbent cloth that removes most of the pearl overspray, which is a good way to keep track of where I am. You don't want to load up your overspray because it'll turn into a mess real quick. But I'm gathering off all the overspray, all the way, pretty much all over the vehicle, because pearl flies everywhere. The next step is actually bringing in the visibility of the fire, which I'm going to be using different types of stencils, French curves, anything curved. I get stuff out of trash cans, anything that has a nice curve to it. Most of these stencils are not solvent proof, so you don't want to load up paint on your stencils because the paint does melt the stencil and the stencil does stick to the vehicle or the surface, leaving plastic residue, which is a nightmare. At the same time, I do play with the regulator up and down as I'm going. There's no fan pattern adjustment on an airbrush except for your hand. Most of this graphic is like 80% freehanded, 20% stencil usage. I try to not use stencils as much as I can. Too many hard edges and you get an artificial look. So I like to keep it flowing. I've already sketched a basic pattern with the touch-up gun. Now I'm coming in with the airbrush. I'm checking my air pressure. Usually about 40, 45 pounds. This is an Iwata siphon fed HPS-BC. I prefer to use this siphon fed bottle because I don't have to constantly go back and refill. Get a nice tight pattern in there. Nice tight lines. Defining. Come in with the stencil, nice sharp curve. It's okay to layer your paint at this point because an airbrush doesn't put out that much material. Always remember, your paint can puddle. You don't want your pearls to puddle up. And overlap lines. Because fire is transparent. That's why I like to use the House of Color Snow White Pearl. It gives a transparent quality. Keep it moving quick. Don't want to pull it up. Keep everything moving quick. Keep the stencil off the surface of the card because you don't want it sticking to it. Because like I said, once again, these are not solvent proof. I can bring out the edge of the throat of one flame by layering right by the hard edge, slowly bringing it out, going into the throat of the forefront flame on the bottom. Take the stencil. It gives the illusion of overlapping flames. Just keep it going. Just keep it going. Don't worry about detail. Don't worry about how real does it look yet. We're not even at that point yet. Got to remember the size of the vehicle. You don't want to get stuck in one spot rendering and worrying about what this looks like. Just keep everything moving and flowing. Another point is once you lay down a hard edge with any kind of stencil you're using, whether it be a French curve, a ship's curve, I don't care what it is, you don't want to come immediately back and touch that surface again because that is very wet pearl and you'll drag it and you'll have scratches and it'll just be a mess. That part is hard to fix. You don't want to keep overlapping pearls because candy will show all errors, mistakes. Anything that you don't want to see, the candy will show it to you. I vary the surface distance from the stencil to the vehicle. To get a special effect, I can touch the surface right to the edge, which, once again, like I said, got to be careful with that because these are not solvent proof. More freehand than stencil. You always want to keep it free and flowing. When you do a tight spot, always watch your air pressure. Your air pressure can stay the same, but watch the distance from the airbrush to the vehicle to the flow of material coming out. Because if you leave it in one spot too long is more than a second and a half. It'll puddle that quick. Between 40 and 50 pounds of pressure. These templates are available at pretty much any art store. They make them a little different now. These are pretty old that I have. I can't find these anywhere, at least not out here in California. But I don't know if they just changed the shape of them due to demand. But these ones are pretty hard to find anymore, this particular shape. I do use several different shapes. And I don't use all ship's curves and French curves. Like I said, you could use a coffee can top, different shapes of stencils. This is a different shape. Once again, this one is not solvent proof. This is for drafting. These stencils don't last very long. That's a bad thing because of the aggressive nature of automotive paint. You can turn them any which way, whatever desired effect you want, whatever you want your curves to be. But you don't want to put too many curves in one spot because you got to keep in mind the size of the vehicle you're working on. This is an H2 180-inch Hummer, so these flame throats have to be pretty big. Keep everything moving. If paint goes where you don't want it to go, that's not a problem at all, because later on you might be glad you made a little happy mistake like that. If I bring the airbrush back a distance, 6 to 8 inches from the surface, and spray a nice even layer of pearl on there, which is probably hard to see now on a black surface like this, but once the sun hits it and the light reflects off of it, you'll see. Don't worry about stopping and starting and where should I begin or how is it looking. Every once in a while I'll do step back and see the flow of the fire according to the size of the vehicle. Anything like door handles or mirror mounts, if you want to go around those, it's totally up to you. If you want that effect, if you want the fire to look like it's bouncing off of something, because usually when fire hits, it'll bounce off. I can spray at different angles to get a desired effect I want. If I want a nice fade out, I spray against like a 45-degree angle away from where I want the hard edge to be. You don't want to get too involved with stencil use because you don't want a whole lot of hard edges. You don't want that artificial look. You want as much freehand as you can get. You come back in the previous places that you've worked and lay down even more pearl to get a heavier concentrate of pearl. The more pearl you lay down, when you put the candy on, the brighter that particular area will be. Get a nice even fade right here, 45-degree angle. Maximum trigger pull back. Lay down more pearl, get a nice heavy bright spot. This fire does have bright spots and intense spots. If you ever looked at a campfire, it does have that. Everything's not even. Everything's not one color. Back up to where I previously worked, lay down more pearl, get some nice bright spots in there. Okay, I'm going to wipe down the overspray, the pearl overspray. I want to keep track of where I'm going and where the bright spots and hard curved areas are. So I come down and I wipe down all the overspray. You don't want to do this immediately because some of this pearl might still be wet. And if you wipe over wet pearl, you smear it, and once again, you have a mess. You have to start over again. And wipe down all the overspray, which will give me a pretty good accurate idea of what kind of pattern I'm laying down. Plus it'll control later on down the line, the more overspray that you have in the vehicle, the harder it is to wipe down. So you want to stay on top of that, especially with pearls. And I can come back in as right after I wipe it down. Come back in, keep the flame going. Now the front end of this vehicle, I'm going to turn the air pressure up a little bit because this is a more concentrated area and I can spread the pearls better. This area I want to have heavy definition in the front. So this is the base of the fire, the hottest part of the fire. But once again, with heavy definition, be careful of how you're laying down your pearls. You don't want them to puddle and run down the side of the vehicle, especially working on a vertical surface. Another nice slow 45-degree angle, full maximum trigger pull. Be careful how much pearl is going down. Yeah, even though the pearls pretty much saturate the air, I should be wearing a mask. This is, like I said, this is automotive paint. This is the reason I wear gloves, because automotive paint, if it gets into your skin and get into your bloodstream, for safety purposes, I do wear a mask. But for filming purposes, in order for me to describe to you how it's done, I don't have one on today. Although you should always wear a mask when working with any kind of urethane isocyanate product. Once again, I'm coming in heavier, making brighter spots. Come back in with the French curve. Now, when I come back in with this French curve, make sure that this spot is totally dry before you lay it back down, because it will stick to the paint. You have the ugly spot right there. Do overlap, you can get in nice tight lines. With this particular airbrush, I can get a nice tight line with this white pearl. To get the veins of a fire. An intense fire has veins. If you ever look at an intense fire really close, it has veins, you know, it's hot spots. At this stage, I don't want to use this template anymore, because now the fire is starting to form. I don't want to force it. That's why I go to more freehand than stencil usage. Anything in nature, I'd rather go freehand. It's less masking, less stencil usage as I possibly can. Some nice hard lines, overlap effects. Come back in the previous area I've already worked. Come in, make it bright spots, nice hard lines, overlaps. Like I said, all fire is transparent. So don't be afraid to overlap or think, I don't want to crisscross this lick with the other lick. That's how fire is. It intermingles with each other. Okay, I'm coming back in with the Tack Cloth to wipe down more overspray. Once again, make sure your pearls are nice and dry before you do this. You don't want to smear anything, especially in the heavy areas. Pearls dry pretty quick. Now, being that we're not going to paint anything on the rocker, I'm going to have the flame coming out of the wheel well. So I'm going to bring it up this way, staying away from the rocker. Just using the French curve just to get a direction. And bringing the flame further and further back. Now that we're further along in the vehicle, I'm sketching in with the airbrush the direction that I want it to go. Where the throats are going to be, how it's going to turn. Keep in mind, don't get too small because of the size of the vehicle that I'm working on. I want to keep the proportion of the flame in conjunction with the vehicle. You're sketching out the flames. If you have rough, straggling lines, don't worry about that. It's okay. This is just a rough draft. Most of that will be covered up. Another thing you can do, if you think you're laying down your pearl a little bit too heavy in one spot, you can use the air from the airbrush to help it dry out a little bit before you move on any further. You don't want to drag that pearl down. It's a hard mistake to fix. Do a nice fade 45-degree angle, maximum trigger pull. There's no certain way to hold your stencil. If you want to go vertical, horizontal, it's okay. Whatever you feel like. Like I said, you keep it flowing. There's no exact science to this. Not brain surgery. And later on in areas like this, we're going to come back with the touch-up gun because it's a large area and I want a heavier concentration of pearl in, so I use the touch-up gun for that. But for now, I'm moving along with the airbrush. And if you flip your stencil this way or that way, always touch it. Make sure the pearl is dry on the stencil. You don't want to stick a wet stencil on the surface of the car. And always check to see how the paint is affecting your stencil, see if it's melting. If the paint is melting the stencil, do not continue to use it. Get a tight concentration of pearl right here. Come in areas where I've already sketched in and define it more. Put in throats of flames. The only time that I use the stencil is just to make a throat. 80% of this graphic is freehand. The other 20% is a little bit of use of the stencil. Like I said, I try to stay away from the stencil as much as possible. The more freehand you use, the more realistic or the freer flowing it is. And you don't always have to use a stencil to get a hard line. You can narrow it down, you get close to the surface. Even with the high amount of air pressure, you can still get close to the surface to get a nice tight line. The reason why I like to use House of Color Snow White Pearl over other companies' pearls, nothing against the other companies, but the House of Color, it flows a lot better. Even if I reduce it down, I can still get a tight line with the House of Color Snow White Pearl. And even with build-up, it just gets brighter and brighter.
At this point, you can begin to work in your overlap. How do you want the flames to intermingle with each other, to overlap, to tie in with each other. You want to leave a little bit of gaps too in your throats because you don't want to go solid with the pearls. Just have a solid color where you can't see the original base of the vehicle showing through. That's what gives it a transparent effect. Now I just flipped my stencil over the opposite side of where I was working. Always check to make sure it's dry. Once again, check to make sure your stencil is dry. If it's not dry, that's what it'll look like if it's not dry. The paint will easily wipe off. You don't want that. You want to make sure it's completely dry before you touch it to the surface of the vehicle. And this is the mirror molding. And you can have your graphic go around it just to give the feeling of the fire is actually on the vehicle. Have it curving off. Now that I'm airbrushing, I can work in bright spots at my discretion because they're working in an airbrush instead of the touch-up gun, which we will go back to the touch-up gun later on, but not right now. The next thing I'm going to show you is how I personally prefer to go around door moldings to keep a nice clean edge. I take 3M blue fine line tape, nice clean even around the door handle or mirror mount or anything else you're working around the vehicle that you want to. It doesn't have to be super even and following along the body line because like I said, this is fired. It's okay to be a little bit sporadic. And after that I take masking paper, adhesive-sided masking paper, which is also transfer right masking paper, just to keep the overspray from behind the fine line tape. Straight razor blade, be careful how you cut. You don't want to splice into the surface of the vehicle. It's best to use a brand new razor blade. And that's what you'll have. You'll have that covered like that. I'm going to spray around the door handle. I've reduced the amount of air pressure because I want to get nice and tight in there. I don't want a whole lot of overspray. So I reduce the air pressure down by about 5 pounds. Come around the end of the door handle. Come around about 3 or 4 passes just to lay the pearl in heavy. And I take the masking paper and tape off. Take it off slowly. And it gives you a nice clean edge around your door handle. Okay, being that they came around this door handle heavy with the white pearl, it's still slightly wet, so I have to be careful of how close I get with the stencil. To take the previous fire, and flow it back into the door handle. You don't have to stay in one spot when you're doing a graphic like this. You just move around the vehicle, as long as you keep track of which direction you want your fire to flow in. Move the stencil around. Nice clean edge. Spray at a 45-degree angle, maximum airflow, just to fill in that air to get a nice fade in with the pearl, away from the door handle. And I can continue back sketching in where I want the direction of the flame to go with the airbrush. And while you're sketching, it's okay to use your stencil. If you think you want a hard edge in one spot, it's okay to put that there. And all throughout, even though I use the touch-up gun in the beginning of the vehicle, I'll use it also all throughout the entire graphic to lay in heavier areas to get a nice even flow of pearl, more even than the airbrush would put out. Step back and look at the direction of your flame. Make sure you're still in context of where you want to be going. On this particular job, the flame is going to taper down into the rocker. I don't want to focus all my attention on one spot. You want to take in the entire vehicle. Keep in mind and keep in vision the entire vehicle, which direction you're going. Okay, being that I'm in an actual limousine shop, And the background noise, as you can hear, this is the real deal. This is actually, we're not in the studio, this is an actual limousine shop. Now in this area, where you can see most of the sketch still in place, you can go back and if you want to add more, you can. You see something you want to connect, you can. You can always add, but you can't take away on this one. One of the problems about this graphic is knowing when to say when. Come in, add highlights, heavy spots, heavier concentration with the pearl. Even though it might seem like I'm working in a small area, I'm always keeping in mind of how large this vehicle is. And that's why you see more of a large circle in certain spots because of the size of this vehicle. Turn the air pressure up. I'm always constantly adjusting and readjusting the air pressure. Not because I have to, it's just the desired effect of how much pearl I want to shoot and at what distance. You can get different effects with your template depending on how far you hold it and at what angle. I can hold it a good inch away, get a nice soft edge effect, or I can hold it right against the surface and get a hard edge effect as you see. Now the overlapping and the intertwining is best to be done free-handed. At least I like to do it free-handed. Coming back to the area I've already been to, you can always add more highlights, more hard edges, fill in areas. Step back and look at the direction of your flow. The intensity, I want to add a little more here. You can always add more. At this stage, you can start playing with shades or how do you want the flames to go in and out of each other. Now's the time you can start mapping that out. Or not mapping it out. If you see something happening, just go along with it. Just go with the flow of it. Everything doesn't have to have a nice curve to it. Jagged lines, crooked lines, is all a good thing. It's fine. It's supposed to be different. Did you notice I may be jumping around a lot? Because like I said, this graphic is not a concrete plan. If I see something happening, I go right to it. I'm always scanning the entire vehicle to see what is going where, how this is curving out, how this is going underneath this. Want to add a nice large highlight area, just keep dusting the pearl over it. Don't lay it down heavy. It'll gradually accumulate. You don't want to have everything the same evenness because it'll look too thin. As much contrast as possible, not all in one area. Okay, being that we've been spraying for a while, the overspray is building up a little bit. I'm going to wipe down with the tack cloth. Make sure everything is nice and dry before I drag this tack cloth over this paint because it will smear, especially in heavy areas such as around the door handle. Once you get all your overspray off, you can continue to work. Around the door handle. You don't always have to use tape around the door handle if you don't want to. You can freehand. Feel free to freehand. add bright spots. Some wide open areas, I'm just lightly dusting in the pearl. At first you might not be able to tell what's going on there, but in the sun, it'll give it that transparent look. You can still see the original base color of the vehicle showing through, and it'll look like the flame is transparent. That'll give it its transparent effect. You don't want everything to be heavy. Once again, I'm jumping all around. If I see an area I want to do, if I see something starting to develop, I don't have to wait till I get to that area. I can just go there. We'll get a little bit of tip dry airbrush. The curls might clog up a little bit. Just blow it out. Now that we're getting along the length of the vehicle, I'm going to step back and check to see how the flames are flowing. See if the way I like them to flow into each other and throughout each other. And so far it's doing what I want. And I say it's doing what I want because this graphic kind of carries itself. It forms itself as you go along. Sometimes I use my light source to see how heavy the pearl is going down. Like from certain angles, you can't see it, how heavy it's going down. From some angles, you can see it great. And I always look at the vehicle from different angles to see how heavy the pearl is. At this part is where you really want to get loose and free because the fire is actually starting to like catch wind and you want it to really flow and you don't want anything too tight. You want to use the stencil less and less as you get to this point. What I'm doing now is I'm going to make the fire coming out of the wheel well a little heavier, just to add some separation to what's already on there. And I laid out just a wild sporadic pattern coming out of the wheel well with blue fine line tape and covered with masking paper. You don't have to go with this width, you can go with wider if you want. And then I cut along here, and I'm going to paint on the inside where I want the pearl to be heavier. Very, very crucial to make sure you have a brand new razor blade when you're doing this step, because if you slice into the pearl, there's no way you can really correct that, and you have to probably sand everything off and start over to get rid of those cut marks. You don't have to press too hard off because it's a brand new razor blade. Using the Developer's Touch-Up gun, all I'm going to do is dust in a heavier coat of pearl of what's already on top of here, not very heavy. Once again, the spray pattern is narrowed all the way down, as far as it can go. Put your air pressure up a little bit to spread the pearls out. and just go along the edge of the tape. All this is going to do is define an area that's coming out of the wheel well. I only do this on large vehicles like this. On motorcycles, it's not necessary. Or if you want to do it off of small cars like imports, you can. But mostly off of large vehicles, I always do this. I want the pro to be heavier, closer towards the wheel well. You don't want to overload it either because the pressure is kind of low. Just to get a coat of pearl in there, and it'll flood easily. You lay it on too heavy. Take the tape and paper off. It gives you a little bit of separation. There's going to be paint buildup. It's okay. When that dries, you just knock the edge down with your hand. The tail end of what I just did, you can taper this off into the flame that I've already started doing now, which we draw it back to the airbrushing. I'm going to let that edge dry before I knock that down. Okay, I'm ready to knock down some of the pearl overspray. I want to touch it in a spot, not on the side, but an inconspicuous spot to see if it's dry enough. And it is. Now we can wipe it down with the Tack Cloth. Knock down most of the overspray because the overspray is building up. And like I said earlier, you want to keep your overspray down. Just to keep track of all where the flame throats are. You want to wipe the whole vehicle down, not just in the spot you're working in, but the whole thing down. That's all pearl overspray that accumulates during the spraying process. As you've seen, I've finished 3/4 of the vehicle off camera using the same technique, and we're about to do the rest of it and we'll finish it up. I'm tacking it down again to knock down some of the overspray accumulation. I want you to keep in mind that this project is shot under tungsten light. Under daylight conditions, the pearl would be a lot more bright, a lot more prominent.
coming down the home stretch of this graphic. I'm laying down the tail end sections of the flame, and this will be the end of the Snow White Pearl base. And as always, never forget to tack down the excess overspray from the Snow White Pearl. The edge I taped off earlier left a little bit of a ridge from the Snow White Pearl. I'm using 2000 grit sandpaper, wet, and I'm barely going to skim the surface just to knock the edge off. And that's all she wrote. I'm going to apply the first layer of candy, which is House of Color KK14 Spanish Gold, with a mixture of 2 parts candy to 1 part SG100, which is an intercoat clear, which acts as a binder in the candy. And I prefer House of Color candies because the intensity, there's nothing out there like House of Color candies. There's other companies that try to duplicate it, but there's nothing out there like House of Color candies, especially in the sun. Can't beat it. As far as the ratios of the mixing of the candies, for this particular graphic, I like to play with the ratios a little bit. It should be 2 to 1, 2 parts binder, 1 part candy, but I like my candy a little more intense, so I'll put more candy in there than normal. And this is about the viscosity that I want it, with that intensity. Before I commit my color to the surface, I always test it, the viscosity and the spray pattern. And that's what I like right there. Nice deep Spanish gold. That's why I like House of Color. First application of color is the KK14 House of Color Spanish Gold. We're going to be using a HVLP to Vilbus gravity-fed gun. Roughly about 35 to 40 pounds of pressure. I'm going to be playing with the pressure as I go down the vehicle to get the desired effect that I need in certain spots. This is roughly 30 pounds. I'm going to gradually come up to 35 in good even coverage. Also adjusting the band pattern as I go also. Laying it down in light coats. You don't want to hammer on concentrate candy. You want to get nice even coats. My highlight areas is where I want the most Spanish gold to be, because those are going to be the really bright spots. I'm going to narrow down my band pattern, zero in on those. Remember to always lay down your candy in layers, thin layers. You don't want to hammer it on. Drop the pressure down a little bit. The overhead sound you're hearing are the fans to inhale the overspray of this candy from this type of gun. This is an industrial gun. It puts out a lot of material, so I have to have a fan on to suck the overspray up. But in this process, it's always very important to wear a mask. I shouldn't be wearing a mask for the sake of the video. I have to speak, so I can't have a mask on now. You always should wear a mask, especially in this process. Gun about 6 to 8 inches away from the surface. The next color is KK08 House of Color Tangerine. I'm going to take this tangerine and slowly fade it into the Spanish gold that was laid down previously. Once again, I'm checking my air pressure. I'm going to be playing with the air pressure up and down, so there's no set air pressure. Also, the same thing goes with the band pattern. Usually I start out with a small band pattern.
going to start behind the Spanish gold and work my way in between it. Tangerine I lay down in very fine coats. That's the only reason for control. The tangerine is also mixed in. It's the same way as the Spanish gold. I lay it down in light coat, you can always add more candy, but once you put too much, there's no going back. Taking the tangerine into the Spanish gold. I don't want to overpower the Spanish gold. I just want to gradually bring in the tangerine to it.
gradually get wetter and wetter with the candy. Okay, the overspray is building up. What I want to do now is, in the areas that are dry, take your tack rag, lightly dust over it just to knock off the overspray. Because if you don't knock off the overspray, you can easily get lost to where your fades are, like from your orange to your yellow. And you want to get a good, nice, clean, even fade. That's a good indication of how much overspray you can get off of just one pass. This is the first pass of tangerine. What I'm looking for now is any kind of blotchiness, missed areas. If you do miss an area and there's a little bit of snow white pearl showing through, it's okay, because in real fire there are really light spots. You don't have to cover everything in candy. Now I can see much clearer where the fades are without the overspray. Lighten out the fan pattern. You put a light coat from the tangerine into the Spanish gold just to even everything out. Usually shoot it at a 45-degree angle. That way I get a nice even fade. You don't want to shoot directly parallel to it because you'll get a direct spray and it's hard to get a fade. So I go in the direction of the fade that I want to go. How far you want to go is totally up to you. Once again, I'm coming in with the Tack Cloth. This area should be dry enough where I can knock down the excessive overspray with the tangerine candy. Now it reveals exactly, I can see more clear where I am. Any light spots. Once again, if you want to leave light spots, that's fine. At this stage, the candy doesn't have to be laid down evenly. I want some of the areas a little stronger than the other areas. One wet coat. Any area that you do want even, just a nice even wet coat. Usually candies are 75% overlap from one pass to the next. And that does it for the tangerine. Next, I'm coming in with the apple red. I'm going to take this apple red and slowly fade it into the tangerine orange the same way I did with the Spanish gold. The apple red is also mixed the same way as the tangerine, the same way as the Spanish gold. Final step after the candies are laid down, I like to get rid of the overspray which is left behind by the candies. Some guys like to leave it. I personally don't. I use the same exact base coat to use to kill down that overspray. I get in as tightly as possible around the graphic. And after that, you have the color sand and polish, buff, and you have a final product. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.